Hello and welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. The fight for justice, the fight for truth. It can be a long, difficult, depressing, frustrating, angering, and exhausting road. This is the story of the mysterious death of Mitrice Richardson and her family who will never give up. They deserve answers, the truth about what happened to their amazing loved one. This is a long one, so let's dive in. Mitrice Richardson was born on April 30th, 1985, to Latice Sutton and Michael Richardson. Growing up, she lived with her mother and stepfather, Larry Sutton, in Covina, California. Mitrice attended South Hills High School in West Covina, California, where she graduated. In 2008, she received her Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from California State University, Fullerton. She also took a test to become a substitute teacher, and she aced it. Mitrice was working at a freight company at the time as an executive assistant. She was extremely smart, goal-oriented. She would make time to volunteer and help others, and she was a responsible young woman who was simply terrific. Mitrice was living with her grandmother in South Los Angeles since it was close to the freight company. Around 2007, she started dating a young woman named Tessa Moon. Yes, Mitrice was a lesbian and out to everyone. It was not a secret at all. She worked as an intern for a forensic psychologist, competed in beauty pageants, and she was a part-time dancer in an LGBTQ+ strip club. Here's a clip of Mitrice during a beauty pageant.
What one technological advancement do you wish had never been invented?
Cell phones. Although when you're stranded, they help contact your family in the need of a spare tire or just in any need of emergency, but they also cause a lot of accidents and they cause a lot of friendships from forming because as soon as people get out of class, the first thing they want to do is talk on their cell phones. So I just wish that cell phones would be limited to just emergencies only.
Mitrice went to a restaurant in Malibu called Jeffrey's on Wednesday, September 16th, 2009. She had a meal that evening at a table overlooking the ocean. Eventually, she gravitated towards a table with a group who appeared fine with her sitting with them. Afterwards, she wasn't able to pay her $89 bill. She gave the restaurant her great-grandmother's phone number. When she was called, the great-grandmother gave them her credit card number. However, the restaurant needed a fax signature. This was due to the credit card companies insisting this was a procedure when there are disputes. Mitrice's great-grandmother didn't have a fax machine, so obviously that didn't work out. The employees and people eating in the restaurant said Mitrice's behavior was bizarre. Since she couldn't pay for her meal, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department was called, and the staff mentioned her strange behavior. The owner of the restaurant was called by the manager, and he said that Mitrice was saying she was from Mars and began to speak gibberish. At some point that evening, she told the valet that she was at the restaurant to avenge Michael Jackson's death.
Los Angeles Sheriff Station, Deputy Shalip, how can I help you?
Hi, I'm calling from Joffrey's restaurant in Malibu.
Yeah.
We have a guest here who is refusing to pay her bill, and we think she sounds really crazy. She may be on drugs or something. We are wondering if someone could come by and pick her up.
Okay, well, what's the address there?
It's 27400 Pacific Coast Highway.
And is she a white, black, Asian, Hispanic?
She's young black girl. She's probably in her 20s.
Okay, what's she wearing?
She's wearing a black T-shirt and I think blue jeans.
Is she with anybody else?
No.
At this point, the staff did not even care about the bill. They did not want her out driving in the condition she was in. Officers from the Malibu Lost Hills station arrived at the restaurant and reportedly got Mitrice to take a field sobriety test. After she completed it, the officers did not believe that she was under the influence of any substances, but she was charged with suspicion of not paying for the meal and having less than an ounce of marijuana on her. The detectives talked to the group of people whom Mitrice decided to randomly sit with, and they said she was, quote, odd but entertaining. Mitrice had worked that day, and her coworkers said she was giddy, really giggly. Latice was really shocked that her daughter didn't pay her bill because she did have $2,000 in her bank account. None of this made sense. When she was taken into custody, police stated that her phone, money, and purse were in her car, which was towed off to a tow yard on the Pacific Coast Hwy. Mitrice was taken to the Malibu Lost Hills Sheriff Station, which is located around 10 miles away from Malibu Canyon. Mitrice was known to be very kempt and well put together. When her mother saw her mugshot with her hair a mess, even that was a red flag. Her mother said, quote, "My daughter would never walk out of the house with her hair looking that way." Latice told the police that she was concerned about Mitrice's mental health. She also did not understand why Mitrice would even be in Malibu randomly on a Wednesday evening. The personnel reassured Latice that her daughter would not be leaving until the next morning when she could come pick her up. One would think the morning would at least be 7 or 8 a.m., but officers allowed her to leave shortly after midnight on September 17, 2009. They knew her mother Latice was worried about her mental health and that she planned on picking her daughter up since Mitrice's car had been towed. 40 miles from home, in the pitch black dark, Mitrice didn't have her cell phone, money, purse, or any of her possessions. She only had the clothes on her back. The custody assistant told Mitrice when she was discharged that she could wait in the lobby if she wanted to, but she didn't. The custody assistant asked her, "Do you have a ride?" Mitrice explained that she didn't, but she was in Malibu to hang out with friends.
I am calling. I'm a little frazzled right now. I understand my daughter is being brought into the station. Mitrice Richardson. Have they made it to the station yet? And she's been booked.
Okay, do you know where she's coming from?
It's some restaurant out in Malibu, and I didn't even think to get the name. The manager's name is...
The only place we have somebody that's in custody that they just announced on the radio that they're coming up is from Joffrey's in Pacific Coast Hwy. It's the only female that's being brought up to the station as we speak. They actually just put it on the radio right before you called.
Okay. I'm her mother, and are you guys going to book her and then release her on her own recognizance tonight because it's dark, she doesn't have a car, and I don't want her wandering out. I'm totally just taken aback because this is so out of character for her, and you'll see when she comes in, she's well spoken. I think the only way I will come and get her tonight is if you guys are going to release her tonight. If she's going to be held in custody for some type of arraignment tomorrow, then I will wait until tomorrow. She definitely has no place, she's not from that area, and I would hate to wake up to a morning report, girl, lost somewhere with her head chopped off, so I guess I would have to come and get her. Oh, my God.
Yeah, we're in Agoura Hills. The only thing is, at least in the station here, she will be separated, so nobody's going to be with her. So at least that's, the plus thing, so you don't have to worry about her safety.
Oh, yeah. No, I feel safe with her being in custody. It's being released, but I'm worried about it. It's crazy out here. All righty. Well, then I will more than likely call and touch bases with you guys a little bit later.
And she'll call you as soon as she comes in, too.
Latice Sheriff Station, Ohana, can I help you?
Yes, good morning. My name is Latice Richardson. I'm calling to follow up on my daughter who was brought in last night around 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Okay, let me transfer you to the jailer. Hold on, please.
Thank you.
We'll hold down. Lost Hill Station, Baumgartner.
Yes, hi. My name is Latice and I called not too long ago regarding my daughter, Mitrice Richardson. How long before a missing persons report can be filed? Is it 24 or 48 hours?
That's normal. Well, it depends on the circumstances, but I didn't take your call, so I'm not familiar with it. Did she just not return home after going out?
She was arrested last night. This is the first time she's been arrested. She's in an unknown area that she's never been in. She's without a vehicle. Nobody can find her.
And where was this at? Where was she arrested at?
Your facility. Her name is Mitrice Richardson.
Okay. Do you know if she's here now, or was she released?
They said she was released.
Okay. And what time was she released?
At just shortly after 12 a.m.
Yeah. Normally, I wouldn't recommend doing one that soon.
Right. What is the time frame?
I guess probably 24 hours would be reasonable. I mean, if there would be some mitigating factors, where you would suspect maybe something, not right.
She doesn't know the area. She's never been in your area before.
Where does she live?
She is unfamiliar with that area.
Do you think she possibly could have gotten a bus home?
No. Listen, my child has never ridden a bus.
Okay.
No.
Right.
She would not know how to ride a bus.
I would probably wait till, early this morning, and if she doesn't turn up, you can certainly call. I don't suspect anything bad happened.
I'm concerned because, first of all, I thought they were going to keep her overnight because she was highly intoxicated. Something is obviously going on with her.
Have you talked to the jailer?
Yes, I have. He said he tried to get her to stable because she was an adult. They had to let her go. I believe that she is highly depressed, and she's in a depressive state.
It could be possible that maybe there's a lot of options and a lot of possibilities, and I don't think all of them would be, something dire. But I can certainly understand your fears, being your daughter and all that.
Well, I think she's depressed. That's what has me more.
That's worried you more than just her? Okay.
That and the fact that she's in an area where she doesn't know where she's at.
Yeah. Does she take medication at all?
No, I believe it's a state that she's in right now because of just the weird activity that's been going on.
What's her name?
What's her name? Her name is Mitrice Richardson.
Okay, and your name, ma'am?
Latice.
Okay, Latice. Here's what I want you to do. Why don't you wait a couple hours and give us some time to I'll go back and talk to the jailer and try and get a timeline of when she was released and, make sure she's not asleep in our lobby or anything like that. And then once you give us a call back in a couple hours, if she hasn't shown up or made contact with you, then maybe we can do something for you, okay?
At 6:30 that morning, Mitrice was allegedly seen in Montanito, 3 miles away from Malibu, by a former KTLA news anchor named Bill Smith. The woman was seen in his backyard. Taken aback, Bill opened up his window to ask her if she was okay. After Mitrice told him that she was just resting, he called the police. When officers arrived, the young woman, who they were almost certain was Mitrice, was no longer there.
Malibu Sheriff Station office, can I help you?
Yeah, hi. Hey, this is Smith at Cold Canyon. We had a prowler walking around through the backyard here, but we don't know what the situation was. I don't know if you have a unit in the area. It might do a little drive-by or something.
Okay, where's this at?
This is Cold Canyon, like hot and cold in Malibu. But it's in the back of the house, which is right where Wood Bluff hits Cold Canyon. And we just had a strange woman walking through the backyard here. It's a fairly large property, and she was sitting on the steps right on the back of the house here. This is kind of a circular driveway, and the gates were closed, so we don't know where this woman came from.
You said the cross was Wood Bluff?
Yeah, that's right. There's a horse trail, hiking trail access through here, but we've never had this kind of thing happen before.
What's she look like? White, black, Hispanic?
A tall, slim, black woman with afro hair.
About how tall?
Well, she was sitting down, stretched out on the wooden steps in the back of the house. Hard to tell, but she looked like she might have been medium to slightly tall, with a big afro hair, very skinny. And I think she was wearing maybe jeans or tight pants with a T-shirt.
You've never seen her there before?
No, never. Nobody ever does that. I mean, the people hike on the trail all the time. The trail goes through our property, but we leave it open on purpose because it's kind of a nice thing for horses and people.
And you said she's laying across she was laying across the steps, or?
She was sitting kind of sprawled out on these wooden steps in the back of the house, right against the back of the house.
She's since got up and left?
She's since gone, yeah. She's been gone about 5 minutes now, but as we thought it over, we thought maybe a little drive-by wouldn't be a bad idea.
And what direction was she last seen headed?
Never saw her. Once she left, she just disappeared. I moved from one window to another. I said to her, I hollered down, "Are you all right?" And she said, "I'm just resting," or something like that. But she's certainly gone out of her way to get that close to the house, because the hiking trail is not that close. It's on the ridge.
All right, well, since we haven't checked the area for her.
Appreciate that very much.
Not a problem, sir.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
On September 19, 2009, Mitrice was reported missing. On the afternoon of the 26th, Mitrice's friends got together all along the Pacific Coast Highway, holding up missing persons flyers with Mitrice's picture on it. A middle school teacher named Jeanette stopped and told Latice that she believed she saw her daughter walking around 7:30 in the morning on the 17th, going south on the road that went through Malibu Canyon. The teacher thought it was odd to randomly see a, quote, black woman walking in the canyon. Someone else said they saw a black woman and a man who looked scruffy and untidy in a Ralph's parking lot on Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu. Detectives went to check out the surveillance video, but they didn't find a thing. The next day, a spokesperson for the sheriff's department talked about Mitrice's behavior while she was in custody, stating, quote, "She was lucid. She did not exhibit any mental problems." Mitrice's mother said, quote, "If the officer saw her behavior and decided to administer a field sobriety test, he must have realized something was wrong." According to everyone at the restaurant the night Mitrice was there, something was not right with her behavior. Something was off. The restaurant owner, Jeff Peterson, was not there that night, but the manager called him about Mitrice and the situation. Jeff said, quote, "She seemed a little euphoric, a little odd. The people she joined seemed okay with it. When she said they were going to pay her tab for her, and they didn't, that's when we realized we have a situation." On October 8th, it had been 3 weeks since the 24-year-old disappeared. Chuck Knowles from the LAPD Robbery Homicide Department told the media, quote, "Mitrice is out there. We don't believe she's a victim of foul play." At the same time, Chuck Knowles and another detective worked around the clock on her case and had assistance over time from 12 other detectives. They were all bewildered, but really believed she was still out there somewhere, alive. Even though her credit cards and her bank account had not been touched, they had investigated every alleged sighting, and unfortunately, those led to dead ends. Chuck Knowles said if Mitrice had been hurt or deceased in Malibu Canyon, the rescuers and search canines would have found her during the huge ground and air search 2 weeks before. Chuck said, quote, "There's no indication of murder whatsoever. We don't think there's a drug or alcohol issue involved. She didn't live a risky behavior life and doesn't seem to have ties to gangs or criminals." While authorities were working on her case, there were also around 50 of Mitrice's friends and family doing their own searches from Malibu to the outskirts of LA County. Detectives went to all the homeless and battered women's shelters in the counties of LA, Ventura, and Orange to see if Mitrice was there. But since she wasn't, they asked the employees to keep an eye out for her and to call if they saw her. The family got a tip that a woman who looked like Mitrice boarded a Greyhound bus that was departing San Jose. There was also a psychologist who Mitrice was a research intern for during her final year of college, named Rhonda Hampton. They stayed friends after Mitrice graduated. She said, quote, "There were times when I've known her to not seem okay, and we talked about that." When she was interning, Rhonda recalled, quote, "She was awesome, intelligent, personable, eager to learn. She was always well put together, the kind of girl who looked good on her worst day." Mitrice did have her days where she would sometimes come into work agitated and appeared overwhelmed. Sometimes she would have outbursts or come in unlike her usual self. On days where she did come in without combing her hair and looking exhausted, Rhonda would ask her if she had a long night or if she was having trouble sleeping. Mitrice would tell her that she'd stayed up all night studying. There did come a point where Rhonda felt like something more may have been going on, and she told Mitrice, quote, "I'm not sure if you're just stressed out or if something more serious is going on with you." Rhonda eventually referred Mitrice to a counselor on campus and began to think that it was a possibility she could be suffering with bipolar disorder, seeing as how she seemed to be developing characteristics of it, such as experiencing mania at times, excessive energy, restlessness, easily irritated, and debilitating depression. Mitrice did decide to start seeing a counselor on campus, and Rhonda saw improvement. She thinks Mitrice knew something was wrong, but the fact that she had maybe a few days out of the year where she was struggling badly and the rest of the time she felt fine, it may have been hard for Mitrice to put the pieces of the puzzle together and realize that she did need help, but she blew it off. I would imagine it would be easier for a psychologist to notice when someone seems to be mentally suffering, even more so than a family who has spent all their life with that person, because it can easily be confused for simply having a few bad days, and not everyone knows the signs to look for. Some people wanted to question or point the finger at the family, wondering how they didn't see that Mitrice was not okay. But it's not that simple, especially during teenage years and someone's early 20s when hormones are raging and sometimes a hug or a talk fixes things. Teenagers are complicated, and that can go into someone's early 20s too. Parents can and do drive themselves crazy worrying about their children all the time. Sometimes young people have mood swings, don't want to get out of bed, and other days they might seem just fine. Figuring out whether your loved one has a mental illness or just a few shitty days out of a few months or a year is not easy and sometimes impossible. For example, Mitrice's mother said her daughter was typically a ray of sunshine. She loved being in the spotlight, and even as a teenager, went to her prom dressed as a princess with a wand and tiara because she was so bubbly and she liked attention. She was almost always a bright, vibrant person. There was a time where a breakup brought Mitrice down so much that she locked herself in her room for a few days. Latice said she never saw anything that would be super unusual for a young person to feel or do, and certainly not any bells or whistles going off that implied she needed to be taken somewhere for mental help. Mental illnesses can slowly start to show right under our noses, and it's not always something that happens right in your face out of the blue that's easy to detect. Questioning or blaming the family or her friends is not okay. If they would have noticed something completely out of the ordinary was going on with Mitrice, they would have sought out help for her. It seems as if whatever was going on with her mentally slowly crept up, going almost undetected by most people, besides a psychologist who is an expert in recognizing these behaviors. That September 16th, it appears Mitrice may have had a mental breakdown. By November 2nd, 2009, Mitrice's father, Michael, told reporters he was at his breaking point. He was putting pressure on the police department to publicly release the footage they had from the night his daughter was arrested. Michael believed it would show that Mitrice was in no state to be discharged. Even if she did not show any signs that she was a threat to herself or others, letting her go, knowing she had no means of transportation, no money, no cell phone, and she was 40 miles away from home, the moment they let her or anyone go from their custody, the department's responsibility to care for that person's safety looks as if it ends there. The sheriff, Lee Baca, said deputies followed procedures to the T. It seems like if those are the procedures, and if they cared about a person's safety, the procedures need to be improved. The police department said keeping someone in custody for too long is a tremendous liability, but steps are taken if someone is considered to have medical or mental disabilities. However, they seem to not have any care or concern about these human beings when they leave their building, which makes for potential risks that are completely unwarranted. The LA Times reported that when people are arrested by police officers in Orange County, they take them to the nearest jail with easy access to public transportation. They have a health department, and their employees work around the clock to ensure they examine the detainee before they are allowed to be released. All of this was practically the opposite of LA County. Even though it is understood that the Sheriff's Department is not a transportation service and the ones they take into custody are responsible for themselves once they leave the police station, the police should not act like difficulties for these people after their release does not exist. It was discussed at the time that for people like Mitrice, who had no means of transportation, that policy creators should explore and consider various avenues that would make sure people who are arrested with absolutely no way to get home safely have options, such as a shuttle bus to a public transportation center, or at least easy access to their vehicle. In cases that may perhaps be rare, where witnesses have said they recognize the person taken into custody was suffering from mental illness, it would be smart to hold those inmates until the morning when the sun is out. A few hours of inconvenience should not be a big deal when it comes to giving someone an opportunity to possibly avert a tragic occurrence. Mitrice's girlfriend, 25-year-old Tessa Moon, still believed in her heart that her girlfriend was alive. She told reporters, quote, "If I could tell her anything right now, it would be, don't be afraid, we're coming." At that time, the LA County Board of Supervisors were offering a reward of $10,000 for information that would lead to Mitrice's location. She was also on the front cover of People magazine that November, and the magazine brought more awareness to her disappearance. In December of 2009, authorities investigated Mitrice's diaries, which she had 4 or 5 of in her car. They believed that before the incident in Malibu, she had not slept for 5 nights and likely had a serious mental breakdown. She had not taken a break from writing in her journals, making phone calls, text messaging, writing on her MySpace and Facebook page. It was non-stop. Investigators were having a hard time even pinpointing a time where she could have rested. Mental health professionals looked over Mitrice's writings and concluded that it was a great possibility she may have been suffering with bipolar disorder. Even though Mitrice was not homeless, she had so much stuff in her car that it looked as if she was living in it. Some of her friends said it wasn't abnormal for Mitrice to stay in her car for a few days at a time. There were clothes that were carelessly thrown about, makeup, books, purses, her journals, and quite a few bottles of tequila, vodka, and beer. Mitrice's father, Michael, was outraged that his daughter was not mentally evaluated before being released and how unsafe it was to let her go. Quote, "I didn't see anything safe about the mountains, the mountain lions roaming around, the canyons, the ditches, or the sexual predators around there." At this point, Detective Chuck Knowles believed Mitrice may have succumbed to the elements because, according to him, there was no evidence that she had been a victim of a crime or involved in drugs at all. Suicide was another possibility on the table, or Chuck Knowles stated, quote, "She may have gotten herself into a comfortable relationship outside of her immediate friends and family. If that's true, until that falls apart, she may not reach out to her friends and family." Her father talked about how she wanted to be a club promoter, among many other things she was doing as far as working and volunteering. He also said that even though his daughter had been in a long-time relationship with her girlfriend Tessa, she had become interested in another woman. As her father read some of her writings, she wrote, "It's tough to be in love with someone who doesn't love you back." With all the things he had read in her journals, he was still convinced Mitrice was alive and someone had her. The sheriff arranged for a 3-person homicide investigation team, 2 detectives, and a lieutenant to merge with the LAPD to begin investigating deeper into the case, even though others working the case at the time expressed they had no reason to believe she was dead. In late December of 2009, U.S. Representative Maxine Waters stepped in. She requested the FBI to get involved and investigate Mitrice's disappearance. Maxine wanted answers, and she was upset. She wrote a letter to FBI Director Robert Mueller where she said, quote, "Based on reports I have read, there are questions as to whether the Malibu Lost Hills Sheriff Station acted properly in releasing this young woman during the pre-dawn hours without money or transportation, all while she was suffering from what the LAPD's doctors have concluded to be bipolar disorder." Equal treatment under the law was brought into question since Mel Gibson was arrested by officers of the same police station after drunk driving, yelling profane statements, threatening the arresting officer, and trying to get away. He was taken to pick up his car from a tow yard upon his release. With the police department claiming they followed all the correct procedures with Mitrice, what procedures were they implementing when they gave Mel Gibson a ride to a tow yard to retrieve his car? This brought up the fact that everyone should be treated the same across the board. On January 9th, 2010, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department began to search for Mitrice in what was reported as being one of the largest scale searches in the department's history. There were about 336 volunteers from many different counties who were trained in search and rescue operations who helped in the 18 square mile canvas of the Malibu Canyon region. There were boots on the ground with search dogs and helicopters in the sky. As Mitrice's father watched the helicopters lift off, he said, "The big wings in the sky, going off to search for my daughter. It's not a black thing, it's not a white thing, it's a human thing." Creeks, paths, and wooded areas and ridges were combed and no signs of Mitrice were found. Divers even went down into a pool in Rindge Dam. Everyone involved was completely mind-blown and mystified by the fact they didn't find a single thing. However, her father took this as a good sign that they didn't find his and Latice's daughter's body or crime scene. This gave them hope that Mitrice was still alive out there somewhere. A spokesman for the sheriff's department gave a statement saying this was still a missing person investigation. Chuck Knowles said, quote, "We'll analyze what search and rescue did, brainstorm, and see where we go next." The family still took this as a positive sign. However, Chuck Knowles made sure they knew, quote, "We didn't look under every single rock and bush because you just can't do it. We wanted to make sure they understood that. They wanted us to definitively say she's not out there. We can't say that." This was, of course, due to the enormity of the wilderness and how it was impossible to examine every bit of it. So far, 40 square miles altogether had been searched around and in Malibu Canyon. In March of 2010, Mitrice's mother and father filed claims of negligence against LA County. The day before their daughter would have been missing for exactly 6 months, they were at the county's Hall of Administration where they expressed their frustrations. They felt authorities were not working hard enough or fast enough, and that politicians were ignoring them. Michael Richardson filed a claim of damages against the county and cited those deputies acted negligently for releasing Mitrice in the middle of the night after being told about her strange behavior by multiple people. Latice Sutton, 2 months before that, filed a claim that was similar. Michael said that this was a drastic measure they had to take. Latice said that the authorities had not been answering her calls or returning her calls. She said they dropped the ball. So, Mitrice's mother and family wanted to get drones to search Malibu Canyon, which the San Diego nonprofit RP Search Services West agreed to do. They provided their unmanned aerial drones to canvass the condensed, obscured, and steep areas of the Malibu area. The department seemed welcoming of the idea and were open to any and all ideas to find Mitrice. Through June 5th and 6th of 2010, 100 people volunteered to help the family canvass the Mononito location of Malibu Canyon. In the culvert of the canyon, there were racially and sexually offensive graffiti on the walls. The paint was fresh, and the ones who did it left behind cans, brushes, and other items that could be potential evidence. In late June, after Mitrice's mother saw the videotape of her daughter in a jail cell showing behaviors like those of a child, she filed a negligence and wrongful death lawsuit against LA County and Sheriff's Department officials. The department had always said that Mitrice was coherent and, quote, normal while she was there. The video proved to Latice that something was not right with her daughter. She first saw the video in late March of Mitrice swaying from side to side in the holding cell. Quote, she's grabbing at a door where she's swinging back and forth. She's pulling at the back of her hair. She tried to make a call at a payphone, but dropped the receiver when she wasn't successful. Latice's attorney told reporters how the police saw this conduct and ignored it. The main reason for filing the lawsuit was so Latice and her attorney could see every single document that the LAPD had on Mitrice, and her lawyer could depose every officer and detective involved. It would also allow the attorney to get a copy of the video that Latice was allowed to watch, but not get a copy of herself. She stated, quote, I feel as though I'm forced at this point to bring this lawsuit to get answers. My hope is she's alive, but based on how long she's been missing, she's either being held and transported or she's dead. I have to face that possibility. The unedited video of Mitrice was never given to the family or their attorneys. They were even told at first that the video didn't even exist. But Captain Tom Martin actually had the video in his desk for months. What Captain Tom Martin said was that he thought the family was referring to cameras that were outside of the police department, instead of the ones that were inside where Mitrice was being held. Did authorities have something to hide? There is an edited video of that night, and a deputy is seen leaving the station right after Mitrice. Did he talk to her? Did they have any interaction at all? Why is there even an edited video if they did nothing wrong and there's nothing to hide? This also brings more suspicion later when her father, Michael, begins to wonder, do deputies have something to do with my daughter's death? There was a promising, credible lead out of Las Vegas in late July. The reason why Mitrice's father, Michael, believed that this could be accurate, also acknowledging it could be someone who looks like his daughter, was that he had been in Las Vegas in the middle of January with some friends from his motorcycle club. All of a sudden, while driving onto a downtown street, he saw a young woman wearing a baseball cap and jeans. She was standing between two palm trees in front of a restaurant. It looked like his daughter. He leapt out of his truck, running towards her, almost getting hit by cars, but when he got to the spot she was standing just moments prior, the young woman was gone. The police investigated his sighting but found nothing. This time, a young man named Greg, who had taken Mitrice to her winter formal in high school, said he was sure he saw her inside of a Vegas hotel at the bar, wearing a white dress and white shoes. Greg said he was walking up to her from behind and said, "Mitrice?" The young woman turned around, but at first she looked at him like she didn't know who he was. Then, in his opinion, she did seem to realize who he was and quickly sprinted off. By the time authorities got this lead and wanted to look at the surveillance footage, it had been taped over. Investigators spent the next few days searching Las Vegas, giving people flyers, talking to sex workers, dancers, and club managers. While Michael was more optimistic and hopeful that his daughter was still out there, maybe doing sex work and being kept by someone who wasn't allowing her to contact her family, Latice's mother was more on the skeptical side of things. Of course she wanted Mitrice to be found. She just didn't think that Greg's sighting was any more credible than the other sightings in Los Angeles. Greg had not seen Mitrice in years, and they were never close. Latice had tried to make herself believe for a long time that her daughter went missing by choice, but deep down, she said, quote, "I know my daughter and her principles, and if she's in her right mind, she would not be out there without contact, even if it were just to say, 'Mom, I'm okay, but I'm going to stay out here.'" Following Greg's potential sighting in Las Vegas, that did lead to 70 other potential sightings on buses, in restaurants, in not-so-nice areas, and also at extremely high-end hotels and casinos. A news conference was held in Las Vegas where authorities begged for Mitrice to get in touch with her family or police. They made it clear that she was in no way under a criminal investigation or in trouble in any way. They just wanted to know she was safe. Mitrice was not a complete stranger to Las Vegas. A month before she vanished, she went there to attend a party and stayed at a Motel 6. However, only a few weeks later, on August 12, 2010, the LA County Sheriff Lee Baca confirmed that the nude, mummified remains they had found in a ravine in Malibu Canyon earlier in the week was, in fact, those of Mitrice Richardson's. The location her remains were found is adjacent to a 21-acre ranch known for making pornography. It's a desolate area that has easy access to the creek bed. When Mitrice's remains were found, the coroner advised everyone to keep their hands off of them. Going against what the coroner said not to do, detectives working the case removed her body anyway. People who lived in the area thought that they heard screaming, possibly around the area she was found, days after Mitrice initially vanished. Mitrice's death was determined not to be a homicide, and there were no signs of foul play or that she had even fell to her death. Her cause of death? Undetermined. At a news conference, Latice did not show up, but she did send a text that said, quote, "It is with great sadness and grief that I tell you, my baby, Mitrice Richardson, has gone on to be with our Heavenly Father. Thank you for all of your love, support, and prayers." On August 20th, there was a vigil held for Mitrice outside of the mortuary chapel where Mitrice's remains had been put in a coffin covered in roses at the Englewood Park Cemetery. Mitrice's aunt, Lauren Sutton, Latice's sister, held a single sunflower and said it was Mitrice's favorite flower. Quote, "They're so bright and sunny, and that was so her." Adding that, even though everyone was gathered there to say goodbye to Mitrice, the family hoped everyone in the community would help them get justice for her. Pastor Jordan Allen from Faithful Central Bible Church quoted this scripture, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." Looking at the family, he added, quote, "It sounds comforting, unless you happen to be the one sitting in this front row. The morning will come when you'll be able to get up and make it from sun up to sundown and without breaking down, and you'll remember the joy." In November of 2010, LA County sheriffs and coroner's officials decided to investigate the mishandling of Mitrice's remains. The coroner said specifically no one should remove her remains until coroner's investigators got to the scene, but sheriff's officials did anyway against the orders. A spokesperson for the sheriff said deputies did remove the remains without coroner's permission. That was something they couldn't deny. They also said they did that because detectives were worried that if they left her remains, there was potential for animals to destroy them. At first, sheriff's officials thought Mitrice's skull and possibly a few other bones were there. At that point, officials were given the okay to move the bones only after coroner's officials could at least see photographs of the scene and give them permission to do so. Sheriff's officials denied this happened, saying they were given clearance to remove some of the remains. So, when the rest of Mitrice's remains were discovered, officials took it upon themselves to remove those as well. They claimed they never got the memo that her remains should not be removed. The sheriff's spokesperson said the goal of looking into this further was to lessen the chances of such critical miscommunication in the future. The investigation would be taken on by the Office of Independent Review, which is the sheriff's watchdog agency. It was reported on December 21st, 2010, that on November 6th, it had been 3 months since the finding of Mitrice's skeletal remains. Her family and a few friends made a difficult hike to where she was found to hold a memorial for her. Everyone wore gloves and helmets as they were led by search and rescue workers. As they attempted to find a little piece, placing sunflowers on the ground and playing a few Aretha Franklin songs, something in the dirt came to their attention. It was a small, yellowish skeleton. Later, it was determined to be a finger bone. The founder of a nonprofit organization that helps people during forensic investigations of their missing or deceased loved ones, Clea Koff, stated, quote, "It was upsetting, distressing, but it immediately told us that, despite the best efforts, the removal of the body on August 9th may have compromised the investigation." Latice requested that Sheriff's Department and Coroner's Office do another search of the area for more possible remains. She also wanted her daughter's body exhumed for testing in hopes they could find out her actual cause of death and not have her cause of death remain undetermined. Clea Koff wanted Mitrice's skull, scalp, and teeth examined for more evidence. She said that near Mitrice's skeletal remains there was a chunk of hair. Entangled in the hair was jewelry and other man-made items. These findings were not consistent with the scene or Mitrice in her life, and any inconsistency with the scene should be examined and tested. There was a belt, a pair of jeans, and a bra discovered a little distance away from Mitrice's remains, and those were to be sent off to a lab for testing as well. Clea said, quote, "This is not a criticism of what has been done. This is about what can be done now." Latice said, quote, "One thing I know about my daughter, she is not a nature young lady. She does not like bugs or bushes. On her own, that is not a place she would wander up to. I have stated before that my daughter was murdered." All officials were on board and wanted to do anything they could to help the family. They planned to exhume her remains, then send them along with the other findings to FBI headquarters in Quantico, Virginia to be examined. Sheriff Lee Baca said a lot of questions needed to be answered, and it was the right thing to do for the family. At the time, the request was under review by the FBI. The sheriff said that it would be better at this point to hand the case over to them and let the FBI handle it instead of complicating things in terms of who could do a better job of the examination. At that time, there had not been a date set as to when Mitrice's remains would be exhumed. Officials were still coordinating all of that with the FBI. Speaking about the criticism that the police station had been facing about letting Mitrice go that night, Sheriff Lee said, quote, "Certainly you have to think twice about everything you do in this business we're in. The most important thing is that Mitrice was offered the opportunity to stay at the station until it was a safer period of time for her to leave. I don't know if there's a policy that can stop a free person from leaving a jail facility, which she had a right to do as an adult. I have for years wanted to reopen the old Malibu station, where people who come to Malibu get booked and not have that distance to go from Lost Hills. It would help people if we don't just put cars in an impound area ridiculously far from where the individual is jailed." He and an LA County supervisor had ideas that they were working on to open a substation in the Malibu Civic Center. On February 13, 2011, coroner's investigators found more remains that were suspected to be Mitrice's. The investigators and 12 others, including a homicide detective, were taken by helicopter and lowered down into the rough ravine. They all searched the area for about 5 hours, finding 8 pieces of bones that would be DNA tested to make sure they belonged to the victim. The bones appeared to be fragments of her ribs, fingers, and wrists. This was the fourth search of the area, and investigators believed it was the last one needed. The next day, it was reported that the FBI refused to examine Mitrice's remains, mentioning chain of custody issues, and that their endeavors and resources would basically be replicating work that had already been done. Again, in May of 2011, Latice filed another lawsuit against LA County for unspecified damages for alleged negligence as well as intentional and negligent infliction of emotional distress. In August, Michael Richardson and Latice Sutton reached an agreement to settle, and they received $450,000 apiece, and half of their cuts went to their attorney fees. Michael stated, quote, "In my eyes, as the father, I didn't receive justice." He said he would continue to speak out about the mishandling of his daughter's case. Mitrice's body had been exhumed by this point, so her remains could be re-examined. Just as a side note, I came across a very in-depth piece in this 2011-2012 timeline, even more than this episode has been, and it's written by Mike Kessler. This was his first feature for the Los Angeles Magazine. He did a phenomenal job, and I'll link it in the show notes, but it is lamag.com/long-form/what-happened-to-Mitrice-Richardson. He meets with so many people involved in Mitrice's case, and I would love for you all to just go check it out. I definitely recommend reading it for even more information. It is just fantastic, phenomenal. I'll have it linked in the show notes under the description of the episode, so you guys can find that there. I think that whole piece is just wonderful, and everyone who is interested in this case should definitely read it. So, on March 14th, 2012, ABC 7 News reported that the review by the County of Los Angeles Office of Independent Review had been released. Their findings were that there were absolutely mistakes made during the recovery of Mitrice's remains. The OIR chief attorney stated, quote, "It was unclear who in the coroner's office was actually making the decision or giving the authorization about what the coroner wanted to do. That was certainly an issue. What still remains in dispute today is whether in fact another phone call was made to the coroner's official indicating that they had more bones than they originally thought." Rhonda Hampton, the psychologist that was also friends with Mitrice, said, quote, "If people who were properly trained to remove a body, if those people were out there and doing their job the way they were supposed to do it, would we be in a different place? I believe it's possible." Sheriff Lee stated at a news conference, "This young lady should not have been brought to the sheriff's station in the first place, and she was ultimately put in a place that she was totally unfamiliar with. Was the death of Mitrice Richardson the result of an accident in terms of being lost, or is it the result of somebody else? And I'm still looking for answers on this." Mitrice's aunt Lauren stated, "Someone needs to take responsibility for what happened to my niece, period. I don't think it's okay to say no one is at fault." In March of 2012, Mitrice's dad, Michael, didn't hold back what he believed happened to his daughter at all. He said he suspects his daughter was murdered, possibly by one or more deputies who sexually assaulted her. Quote, "I want these people before a grand jury. You can't answer one simple question. What happened to Mitrice Richardson that night? Steve Whitmore, the sheriff's spokesperson, responded that there was absolutely no evidence to back Michael's claims about the involvement of deputies, saying, "We categorically deny that." Mitrice's family wanted the California Attorney General's office to go over the handling of their loved one's case by the sheriff's office. 500 pages of documents were sent to be reviewed, and in November of 2015, our now Vice President and then Attorney General Kamala Harris said that they did not find anything that would call for charges against the sheriff or any deputies involved, and they didn't find any proof that the sheriff's office had mishandled Mitrice's case. That changed in January of 2016 when the Attorney General's office backpedaled on their initial remarks and stated they would begin a criminal investigation of Mitrice Richardson's case. Although on December 30th, 2016, they determined there was not enough solid evidence that would be grounds for criminal prosecution of anyone involved in Mitrice's case. In September of 2019, 10 years after Mitrice had gone missing, the new sheriff, Alex Villanueva, said at an event that he would like to get to the bottom of it and that he wanted to assess the entire case. People began to think, or had thought, Mitrice's case had been closed or gone cold, and now it was being reopened or reassigned. But, to the contrary, her case had always been open. The sheriff wanted to go after the truth and get to the bottom of what happened. Quote, "I want to assess the entire case from the beginning with a whole new fresh set of eyes, and that means we will go back and we're going to canvass and we're going to walk the entire length of it." At this point, more people were beginning to believe that something sketchy went on with deputies and Mitrice after she left, and maybe her dad Michael was onto something after all. Nothing could be ruled out. Everyone was pumped and excited that there were implications that there was going to be a new investigation. The mood went down when they realized the fresh new eyes comment just meant that he was going to go over the files and there would not be a new investigation. The new sheriff said it had been investigated so many times with no evidence found that he didn't think a new investigation would do any good. These comments were said at a memorial for Mitrice. Afterwards, her mother spoke, quote, "I acknowledge the policy changes and appreciate that he came here today, but the reports he cited were compiled by a corrupt sheriff's administration, and there's evidence that now retired people at the Lost Hills station lied. When he said there would be a new, fresh set of eyes on this case, I expected things to be different. There is no way this is okay, and we're not going to let it go." On October 12, 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom rejected Bill 42, which would change the rules about inmates being released. Bill 42 would allow them to stay until daylight if they chose, and give them a safe place to wait for someone to come and get them. Plus, it would allow for the person being let go to be permitted to charge their cell phone while waiting. Governor Newsom said allowing inmates to wait until daylight hours was a costly obligation on local governments that would have to be repaid by the state. In his veto message, he expressed that even though late-night jail releases were an unsafe practice that result in many tragic outcomes that could be prevented, they should be addressed with a more customized method that doesn't put the state treasury on the hook for local jail operation codes. State Senator Nancy Skinner, who wrote the bill, said she did understand the financial concerns, but, quote, "The reality here is lives are at stake. This notion that there is a more targeted way to do it that would cost less, no one has recommended yet. There are not very many people released from jail that are going to opt to stay in the safe place until business hours. There just won't be that many, but if it saves even one life, that's good enough." In the end, Senator Nancy Skinner said the sheriffs have the power to do the right thing. In March of 2022, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors increased and extended a reward offered for information leading to a conviction in the death of Mitrice Richardson to $20,000. Also reported that same month, the new sheriff made changes to the department, taking the advice of Bill 42 that was vetoed. The department no longer waits to take missing persons reports for adults and makes sure that inmates have their cell phones and personal belongings returned to them before being released. In late September of 2022, Rhonda Hampton stated, quote, 3 years ago, on September 17, 2019, I found myself in a fit of rage directed towards Los Angeles County Sheriff Alex Villanueva. We had just finished a press conference in which he backed out of a promise he had made 2 weeks before to put fresh eyes on Mitrice Richardson's case, stating there were many mistakes made in the investigation of her disappearance and death. His backing out of this promise brought me to the realization that this case would not be solved by those charged with serving and protecting the community. Overwhelmed with emotion, I began yelling at the sheriff, but was stopped in my tracks when he made the statement, quote, "None of my detectives want to take on her case." My parting words to him was that he was the head of one of the largest law enforcement agencies in the U.S., and he was in the position to make it happen if he wanted to. That was 3 years ago, and her case has yet to be solved. I continue to have faith that her case will be solved someday, but I am faced with the reality that those who could solve her case will not. This Saturday, September 17th, will mark 13 years since Mitrice Richardson was released from the Malibu Lost Hills station, and while I usually place sunflowers in front of the station, this year I will not travel the long distance from my home to the station, but rather I have chosen other means to continue to share her story in hopes that someone will help in solving her case. Please visit the Find Mitrice Richardson Facebook page on Saturday the 17th and see if you can help bring about justice. #Justice for Mitrice Richardson. That Facebook page is facebook.com/Justice for Mitrice Richardson. There was a huge data dump by Rhonda on localmalibu.com, which also shows never-before-seen documents and more. From this data dump, a volunteer found a graphic mural which depicts images of a naked African-American woman in various sexually explicit positions. Captain Joe Stephen, who took over for Captain Tom Martin after Martin was promoted after lying about having that video of Mitrice at the station, made the statement that the mural was unrelated to Mitrice, and the individual who admitted to the mural and turned himself in had no charges filed against him. On a blog post from our friends over at All Gay Long, they gave a backstory and what happened to the sheriff, Lee Baca, and Paul Tanaka, second in command at LASD. So, Sheriff Lee Baca was sheriff from 1998 to 2014. Google defines him as the very definition of a bad cop, and he was involved in multiple scandals during his time as sheriff, including lying to the FBI about the abuse of inmates in LA County jails. Finally, in February 2020, he began a 3-year sentence in Federal Correctional Institution Latuna, a low-security prison outside El Paso, Texas, for his role in obstructing this particular case. Paul Tanaka, second in command at LASD, was sentenced to 5 years in prison for the same thing. It is not clear why he got 5 and the actual sheriff only got 3. Paul had also been traced back to having ties with the white supremacy gang, the Linwood Vikings. Again, that was from a blog post created by our friends All Gay Long. Something is definitely fishy about this whole tragic, heartbreaking situation, and the Richardson family, Mitrice's friends, and the public deserves to know what really happened that night, because someone knows, and that's the most frustrating part. In the beginning of my research, I did believe that maybe, due to her mental break, she got lost, stumbled into this ravine somehow, and passed away due to the elements. The more that comes to light about these officials who worked her case, the sketchier it seems. What we are definitely learning in recent years is that what you do in the dark will eventually come to the light. If someone was involved in Mitrice's death, I do have faith that it will come out. I really do. Now, to close us out, Rhonda wrote, "It will take a village to solve Mitrice Richardson's case, and I appeal to anyone with information, no matter how small, to come forward. How can you help in the investigation into the death of Mitrice Richardson? Review all the information that has been shared about her case. Continue to monitor her story for updates. Share her story on your social media. If you have information or thoughts about her death or regarding the investigation of Mitrice Richardson, you can leave an anonymous tip at 866-409-9882. Email drrhondahampton@yahoo.com. That's drrhondahampton@yahoo.com, or she says you can DM her on social media. Thank you so much for listening to this episode about Mitrice Richardson. Please share this episode or the articles in the show notes and spread the word about her story. There is someone out there who must know something. Until next time, please stay safe and take care of yourselves and others.